71% of males and 40-something% of females are already mildly sarcopenic as they reach age 65. Now, in case you were wondering, what does that mean? Sarcopenia means the loss of muscle and loss of strength both. So one is related to the other. And so how are we hurt by that? Well, obviously frailty, more likelihood of falling. We're vulnerable and we feel it, but also is related to body composition. So if our muscle mass goes down, just simply by default, our percent body fat has gone up, even if we haven't gained any body fat. And that doesn't bode well for disease. It's not just, oh, we're fat. It's we are more at risk for heart disease, for cancer, and diabetes. So muscle, holding on to it, getting more of it, we all should be hoarders where it's concerned. I'm Deborah Atkinson. You're listening to Flipping 50, where I address your top struggles and concerns, maybe before you know they should be concerns, but most of all, hope to inspire you that we can change the way that we're aging, that the role models that we're now looking at, maybe in our parents who are in our 80s or 90s, as we watch them, they're not going to really give us a good bird's eye view of what's possible. Because the science has changed so much. I mean, imagine it. We're the first generation who's getting to the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, having exercised with resistance training more of our lives than anyone else has. And now that we know, how do we actually use those weights, use that strength training, use what we know to work and apply it so that we're not just quote unquote blindly exercising or checking that box, but we're really doing it in a way that helps our longevity and along the way helps us enjoy and love the life we have with the energy we want. This episode is really diving into how to eat. So we cover here how to eat, how to move, and how to change your mindset. And there may be a little of that on all 3 points involved in today's podcast. If you are a regular listener, you may know that this is very small speck in the whole spectrum of the importance of this podcast episode, but this one's being released a little bit late. And here's the reason why. It was already recorded. It was pre-recorded, ready to go, ready to release. And then I realized there's more here that I need to go into. And so we re-recorded literally, this is middle of the morning on Tuesday, and we're usually having released it about 6 hours ago. So for those of you who are dedicated listeners and subscribers, you download it, maybe you listen while you walk from your iHeartRadio, or you listen from iTunes. Or you go to the website at flipping50.com and find the podcast and listen there. Thank you for being regular listeners, downloaders, subscribers. And I apologize. I know you may have wondered, where are you? Isn't there a podcast today? So here it is. And for those of you who are not really in my world yet, but this podcast maybe resonates and you want more, every month, second Wednesday of the month, we do a Flipping 50 free masterclass that's open to the public. Much of the other things that I do are really for our insiders group in our cafe membership, our Flipping 50 membership. And we deep dive into specifically what's on their minds, what's going on in our community. But here, I do have my ear to the ground from social media, from other places, and what comments and questions are. And I'm paying attention to what other quote unquote influencers are sharing and what might be missing and gaps of information that I really think you're not hearing the whole story and you need to get it. So you can expect to find that if we've got a masterclass open for registration. We just put a banner on the website. So flipping50.com. If you don't want to become a subscriber in order to be the first to know and save your seat, you can simply go there and you will see it. So here we go. What to know about creatine supplementation over 50. And if you're brand new to the bandwagon of protein is really important and I need more protein than I ever thought, and I'm maybe mentally resisting that a little bit because it's a challenge for me to, first of all, increase what I'm eating. A lot of women still struggle with that. Shouldn't I be cutting back and avoiding food? And maybe there's some gut issues going on, which I find is a secondary reason. As a coach working with midlife women for 38 years, but in an isolated, exclusive way for the last 10, you can imagine the hundreds of thousands of women I talk to. Gut issues are rampant. And when that's true, we're abusing potentially intermittent fasting. We're abusing it because we're using it to avoid food, because eating food sometimes makes us highly uncomfortable or bloated. And so a lot of women will say, oh, I felt so much better while I was fasting. But you haven't solved the root problem of the gut issue necessarily by simply avoiding it. So that's not necessarily, then I think we can agree, a great solution. But I want you to realize this may feel like, whoa, I don't know that I'm ready for this. But what I hope you'll do is stick around and keep listening, even though, because the realization that why we need to start looking at, maybe I should consider this something that maybe I thought was always for bodybuilders or figure competitors and people who were gym rats, but certainly not for me, or maybe for my teenage son, but now we're getting the research we so widely need, and it's telling us more about why we're going to benefit. So let's dive into this. Stick around, stay with me. I've been asked about creatine, and I did talk about it in our Flipping 50 April Masterclass series. And by the way, we may briefly mention it this month if you're listening in August, but be sure you go to the website. And I'll give you the show notes link, flipping50.com/creatine. This podcast will read like a blog. So if you're somebody who'd rather consume that way, or you want to come and review it, you can certainly do that. So I share in that April masterclass that I was beginning to take. I was just a couple weeks into taking creatine on a regular basis. And here's why I started it. Number one, because I felt needed to know, and I never share anything that I don't use myself, know, love, or either not have negative responses to, so that I know it's safe. And that's important to me. And if I feel myself any gut feeling like, I don't think I want to try this, I don't think I want to do this, that tells me a lot. I'm certainly not going to recommend to you that you do it. I may recommend this is someone else who talks about that. Go talk to them, because I'm not feeling like, I'm certainly not going to play instant expert. I guess that's the best way to say it. And I'm also not going to dampen maybe your interest in something that my lack of knowledge is going to hold you back. So there are several things to consider, but I want to share what happened when I tested it and why I felt that now was the right time for me. And that reason is I have been lifting weights, and we can say pretty consistently, for 38 years. As long as I've been in and changed my own major, and it might be 30, it might be 40 years. There have been times in there I've been injured, times in there that was about it. Actually, postpartum, I suppose I waited 6 weeks at least to start again. But other than that, pretty regularly for that period of time, someone lifting weights and doing the right thing with nutrition, changing what that was in midlife so that I'm honoring the changes that occur with my hormones. I'm doing something different, not expecting the same results with a different set of hormones, because that won't work. So those of you who are out there saying, I can't, what I used to do doesn't work anymore. Yes, bingo, it won't. Why would it? You don't have the same hormones you used to have. So changing your exercise and nutrition and potentially sleep and stress, all that is part of what we talk about here at Flipping 50 so you can have the fitness you want. But I was realizing that kind of about 2 years into postmenopause, that I wasn't getting quite as good results as I wanted to. And, don't we all want to peak out, right? We want to have the peak. And I don't mean bikini ready is not my jam. And what I do mean is looking at now, in 10 and 20 and in 30 and 40 years, what's that going to look like? I recently interviewed a 90 something year old, 93. That'll be coming up. And she was on my podcast. So she's marketing herself to be on podcasts at 93. And the bar just went up. Okay, was I thinking like that? I certainly was not. So I don't know about you, but I think we now are going to have a few examples and hopefully we will be those examples. But I wanted, although I was getting the protein and very clear about quality protein and essential amino acids on a regular and daily basis, along with resistance training in the right way, not just blindly, oh, I'm lifting, but feeling like there's probably a little bit something more I can do. So this is something I was very open to, and looking at the research pointed me directly to it. So you may be wondering what it does and why creatine supplementation might be right for you. It is another one of those things that we will produce naturally less of as we age. In the first, against muscle loss and frailty, that is the most important thing. We want to avoid muscle losses. We want to avoid muscle weakness and frailty. So we have to support lean muscle gains. I mean, there's just no way about that in every way possible. And doing that is also avoiding things that cause muscle breakdown and loss, like overexercise, inadequate food. So it's been used and it's been questioned for decades as a supplement for bodybuilders, figure competitors. And you too may have asked about it if you had teens or young adults, especially boys, hoping to gain size and strength for a high school football. That was quite frequently when I was asked as a fitness and strength and conditioning professional by moms, is this okay for him to take? Should he be taking that? And honestly, when I was first asked 15 years ago, I said, right now, we don't have enough information about it. So all I could say to you is, if it were my son, I would probably not do that first. I would make sure he was getting adequate protein intake, adequate sleep, and vitamin D first, because we need those for good health anyway. However, you may start hearing more about it for you as we look for ways to boost muscle mass in older adults for decades ahead. And as with anything else, research featuring older adults is really what we're exploring here at Flipping 50 and in this podcast. The good news, the science suggests there aren't any known negative side effects for older adults who are taking it, and supplementing with this could help avoid sarcopenia. So, two good things. It is still always, by the way, wise to consult your physician about any medications that you may already be taking, any interactions between that and a supplement that you want to start, or supplements you might also be taking, because you want to look at, will one interfere with the absorption of the other or deem it ineffective if they're taken at the wrong timing. So let me define sarcopenia for you. So I haven't somewhat, but it means it's when there is a significant loss of muscle and strength over a lifetime without any strength or dietary interventions to prevent it. This loss is associated with diseases, including but not isolated to insulin resistance. And by the way, we now see that in young adults, 20-somethings, more and more often. It's not a disease of age anymore. Diabetes, obesity, heart disease, and cancer, just to name a few. And I want to come back to the fact that I mentioned insulin resistance and I mentioned diabetes separately. And if you know diabetes, you may be thinking, well, that's the same thing. It's true, but many midlife women have insulin resistance, don't realize it. They've not been diagnosed with diabetes, even pre-diabetes, but they don't know it. It's something to look under the hood about if you're having weight loss resistance and or if you're gaining weight and do not know it. Insulin resistance could be to blame. And you may say, well, I had my labs done. My blood sugar looked great. It's fine. It's in norms. But it still may be that looking at on a day-to-day basis how you're doing, a continuous blood glucose monitor can be really helpful. And I will try and remember there are a lot of links that are going to go in this podcast. So it's going to be really a juicy blog post for you to look at, but I'll put my link to continuous blood glucose monitors in the show notes. I can save you $25 off your first month, and I would recommend just do a month. You'll learn a lot, probably enough. And then what you need to do is go and apply it. And wearing that monitor more may not necessarily help you any with the accountability that you need to go on further. Okay, so how do you know if you're sarcopenic? That should be your next question, just saying. So to calculate whether you're sarcopenic, you want to determine if you're already mildly sarcopenic by looking at your muscle mass index. Now that might sound familiar because it's similar to or sounds like body mass index, BMI, which is an antiquated and still overused in doctors' offices as a measure of health. Instead, MMI or muscle mass index tells you more about your body composition, even without a scale. Now, you're going to need a smart scale, by the way, in order to calculate MMI. So it's a measure of your muscle mass, your skeletal muscle mass, and that's important, divided by your height squared. So you input your height and your lean muscle mass in pounds, and by that, probably better description is skeletal muscle mass. What we're excluding is smooth muscle tissue, like in your stomach and your organs. So that we're not counting. We don't want to count your internal organs and your bones. So we're not just figure out your percent body fat. And then if that's 30, then the rest is 70%. And you divide or do math to figure out your weight of that. That's not it. We're just talking like your appendicular skeletal muscle mass, your arms, your legs, your torso, back, chest, that kind of muscle mass is really what you need to have. So if you have a smart scale that tells you that, or you have access to find one in a gym, that would be fantastic. So you need that, and you want to get that in pounds. And if you want to cheat and not do the math, so what did I just tell you? It was your height squared, right? And generally it's done in meters, right? So everything is kilograms and kilograms of your muscle mass and your height in meters squared. So instead, so you don't have to do the math, and I don't either. You can go to a BMI calculator. There's one online. I'm going to put the link in the show notes. But instead of putting in your height and your total weight, just put in your height and your muscle mass in pounds. So again, skeletal muscle mass, not what's left over after body fat. That's important. And then you can use this ranking. I have put in the show notes mild sarcopenia for males and females, what that is, and severely sarcopenic, what that is for males and for females, so that you're aware of those numbers. And obviously, if you're higher than that and significantly higher than that right now, you know you're doing well. But if you're flirting with getting too close to these, do something, right? So much better to know. So my experience with creatine supplementation, it has made strength gains easier, my recovery faster, or I hesitate to say that. So it has been faster, but what I'd really like to say is like an unmentionable. Like I didn't even notice. Like there wasn't soreness, there wasn't undue fatigue. Even though it was a strenuous workout, I don't know about you, but sometimes I kind of enjoy feeling that, oh, my glutes are a little bit sore, or I notice that when I'm getting up or notice it while I'm going into a yoga pose that, that strength training workout. Yeah. Reached some muscle fatigue there. But I didn't have, true discomfort or tear down, even though I'm doing pretty significant workouts. And I noticed I was lifting heavier and or doing a few more repetitions. But usually when I know I can do that, I will lift heavier instead, because the gains of strength and the gains of lean muscle mass are so much greater if you have the ability to do it. And yet was still recovering with ease. And my muscle definition was far better, and it takes somebody else pointing that out for you to notice it. You look in the mirror every day, you don't really notice that. And I don't know about you, I don't spend a lot of time looking in the mirror, but when you brush your teeth, you get in and out of the shower, it's there, right? So all of that happened for me without trying harder while I was taking creatine. So in other words, I've got the same routine and same effort habits with improved results. I'll take that. So how do you do it? How do you use creatine? It's 5 grams is the dose, and that's about 2 teaspoons full in a simple shake. If I'm going to do it before, and simple shake by our definition is just your protein powder plus unsweetened, say almond milk, or just even water is fine. But that's you're taking in a little protein and the creatine before you work out. That would be ideal. That's my preference. Now, I don't always get that done. It just timing wise, or, I'm not hungry. It's been, I'm about 2 hours from a meal. I don't need something more. I'm just ready to work out. So if I didn't have it before, then I'll do it after. And generally I have a shake or smoothie afterward. If I'm just timing wise, it's time for a meal, I might just start into a glass of water, and it's, it's going to be a little chalky, but it does again have a taste. So you won't really notice it. So I'm going to show you that you do want to have that measure. And again, I would look at, do you have that? Are you mildly, sarcopenic? Or you're doing okay, but you want to do better, then it might be a reason to have one. Who's a good candidate? So this is important. If you're a brand new to strength training gal and you're in your first 3 months, I would not necessarily consider it for you. But if you've been lifting for a period of time and you've been optimizing the adequate strength training stimulus followed by, by following strength training recommendations necessary for that enough, right, overload that I share here at Flipping 50, you're a perfect candidate for creatine. For beginners to strength train, you're already going to see gains in muscle fiber recruitment in the first 6 to 8 weeks that will lead first to your strength. And you're not going to increase that. Much of that is due to neural connections, kind of your brain rewiring to talk to more muscles, recruit them, get more of them to play and work harder. That's not going to be changed by creatine. So take advantage of that. Just doing what you need to do, consciously starting to focus on your protein next, get those 2 things where they are. And then somewhere between 3 and 6 months, into lifting, I would at least that long. Then you might want to look at it if you want to say, how could I boost my results? So for women, so a couple things. With additional lifting and adequate protein, there will be plenty of support for you beginners to create a greater number of muscle fiber and size. And though I don't want to scare anybody, size should not be emphasized here. As with age, it's going to be difficult to create great muscle size. And for women, this statement should also not be a deterrent. If I say we're going to increase muscle size, it's going to be undetectable to the human eye, but internally it's changing your shape, right? So it's very hard as an older woman, meaning over 50, to actually gain hypertrophy, which is the size in muscle. So if you are, or you are one of those women who still fear bulk from lifting weights, often the reasons are this: you're using the wrong protocol. If you tend to bulk easy or did in your younger years, if you're doing 3 sets of 10 repetitions, that's a bulk building protocol, babe. So stop it right now. And you want to lift either more repetitions, meaning lighter weight, or you want to do heavier weight and fewer repetitions. Either one of those is your goal. And, flip-flopping and changing it up is probably the best for you because you're going to respond to all kinds of stimulus. Another mistake is eating insufficient protein. So if you're lifting weights, you're eating insufficient protein, but probably somehow you're increasing what it is you're eating. If you're eating too many carbohydrates, that may be the reason you're seeing bulk, but it's probably not muscle. If you're under eating or you're overeating, again, carbs and fat could be causing inflammation, and that's what you're seeing. So it's actually that your bulk is not what we're going to think of as muscle mass, which would be toned and conditioned and defined, but instead you're puffy. That's inflammation. That's not muscle being the problem. Then there's not allowing recovery from exercise. So it's those people who go in overzealous and think they've got to do something every day who tend to gain weight. And again, it's more of that puffy, inflammatory weight gain. You're soft, you're a little more doughy than you want. Or can we say it nicely? A little more padding in the cushions, right? You may actually need to back off and do high quality workouts, but do them a whole lot less frequently. That's where less exercise, more movement comes in at Flipping 50. For a beginning strength trainer, let me say that again, adequate benefits are going to come from your increased overload by simply lifting. Additional benefit from creatine or other supplements, probably not going to come for you, but you do want to consciously start on protein intake. The first steps to better results: strength training or lifting. Step 2, be aware of your regular intake of adequate protein at meals. And there are multiple places on the site where you'll find more details about that. Intake of protein close to weight training sessions is really key to boosting muscle protein synthesis and buildup. So bookending your workouts. And I don't mean you have to eat right before and eat right after. We've actually very recently researched relaxes that, right? But you do want to stop cortisol breakdown. So if you're fasting overnight or for an extended period of time going into your workout, you're already in a breakdown. And then you go into exercise, that's a breakdown. So it's really important that you're looking at overall every day, are you getting at least your body weight in pounds, in grams of protein? And are you making the strength gains and mass gains that you want to? It's very hard to look at someone who is already a tiny human person and who is also fasting and says, well, I exercise fasted, and expect, if you are not that build and size or frame, that you'll get the same results. So we've got to really look at, who are you? What's true for you? When is your energy best and most optimal? So you'll work hard during your sessions and get more out of them that way than you ever are going to burn more fat by doing it fasted. So 2 ways to think about it, but generally high energy, the ability to lift more, lift a few more repetitions, or go harder and faster or longer, those are going to win you the most benefit in terms of gaining lean muscle and losing fat compared to exercising fasted. Just saying. And we can decrease that cortisol breakdown as well. Okay, then the last thing you would want to look at is, if you're just beginning and you've begun all those other things, then it would be additional supplements, might be creatine. I'll talk a little bit about this further into the podcast, but this recommendation or supplement does not precede eating whole foods like lean meats, well grown, cared for, and harvested wild when possible, and organic vegetables. Eating all the right things is first and foremost your best line of defense. And then it's like, how far can I run with that? And if I can't quite get to the goalpost, then looking at supplements to help me the rest of the way. So from the literature, quote unquote, creatine supplementation can augment gains in muscle mass and strength during a period of exercise training in older adults to those older adults already who are optimizing adequate strength training to their advantage as opposed to beginners. So just to know that that's the ideal recommendation, that it's not going to do you any good. Potentially you're just taking it. It's not going to do you any harm if you're a beginner and start on it, but there's other things and a timeline when it will help you more. So how to start if the timing is right, if you're severely under muscled, or you're frail and weak already, maybe you had periods of bed rest, surgeries, a virus, right? Research suggests that you start this way. And I will tell you, I did not. I simply started with the day-to-day 5 grams per day. Research would suggest that you supplement a relatively large dose if you're really in need 4 times a day, taking 5 grams at a time, meaning 3 meals maybe, and, one more time in the morning or right after a workout or right before bed, you're going to supplement that for a 5 to 7 day period. So maybe Monday through Friday, or you do it for a full week, to increase your skeletal muscle phosphocreatine content. So it just bumps it up so that then taking that daily creatine boost brings you up and above it, and the maintenance dose of 2 to 5 grams. But most of the other literature, so this comes specifically from one of the literature sources quoted here in this podcast, but most of the other recommendations are that daily it's 5 grams. So I would tend to go with that. You don't want to be under quota, because it's not going to help you just a little bit if you don't reach a threshold in most cases, as in protein consumption. So like you might say, well, I had protein at your meal. Maybe, but if you had 2 eggs, you had 12 grams of protein, and that doesn't even come close to reaching that 30-gram threshold. So it is important that you reach the threshold in order for it to do good. So I would suggest that you're closer to 5 on a daily basis as well, especially something like this where it's easy. We don't have to worry about getting full or not being able to consume it all. It's just a powder added to a smoothie, ideally. So additional candidates, prime candidates for creatine supplementation, if you're a vegan, you're a vegetarian, or anyone listening who avoids red meat, you may want to consider creatine, because meat, specifically red meat, are best sources of creatine. So winning at this, it's tasteless, so it is an easy addition. I use it daily, and yes, on recovery days too, because that's been a question. So you're still building, you're recovering from those workouts, or you're sustaining during those off days. So I've always likened this to, do you still need protein? Yes, you don't need extra, like you don't need that extra one that you might have right before a workout, but you do need the same amount of protein on a day-to-day basis. If you create X amount of lean muscle or want to, you have to feed that every day, right? Like you don't just feed your puppy while you're at home. Like that puppy needs to eat when you're gone too, right? So look at it the same way. So again, back to just quoting the exercise nutrition tips. Remember, food first. I'm certainly not a supplement pusher, but I am a believer, and I grew up just like you did. We went through all of that have a vitamin, you need a vitamin. And then it was like, forget it. You're flushing it down the toilet. No longer do we think that, and I know some of you might equate, well, all that happens is I get very colorful urine when I take vitamin. That means that the vitamin went through you so you could absorb it. That's a good thing. It doesn't mean you flushed away the good things in the vitamin. It means the vitamin went through your body, absorbed the goodness from it. And so that colorful urine is not a sign that it didn't work. So we do need probably to look at in our lifetime now. Soil quality is not good. Organic foods are not as good as they were even 20 years ago or 10. So it's important that you also check your micronutrient sufficiency, because again, nobody likes to take supplements, me either. But when I do a lab test on myself and look at micronutrient sufficiency, where's my vitamin D level, my vitamin B12, my omega-3s, my ratio, and magnesium, where are those at? And then I know, yep, this is why you're taking that daily, and actually you need to bump that up, or maybe we're okay, we need to bump that down. Now we're not trying to get it up to sufficient. It's important, and it really helps our compliance, yours and mine. And then you can kind of see, all right, I'm going to do this for a while, I'm going to retest, and that helps to have someplace running to, as opposed to just blindly taking things for a while. And remember that healthy isn't enough, just healthy eating, because your healthy food may not agree with you anymore, what used to be good. So you want to make sure you're considering your gut health and using signs of gas or bloating, constipation, diarrhea as signs to do something, real big red flags. But it also might be that you're just weight loss resistant or not seeing change or definition that you need to. You may not be absorbing all the good things you're eating. So that's an important question to ask. You're not what you eat, but what you absorb. Your midlife body might need a change, either a change in the way you're strength training or exercising, or it might need a change in your nutrition and or your supplementation to give you the rewards that you deserve from the exercise you're doing. I hope that this was helpful. I've got 2 references that are here in the show notes today. So if you are a prove it to me girl and want to see the science, you can absolutely go look this up for yourself. Although, you have that at your fingertips, right? PubMed is there, publicly available for all of us. And if it's a matter of, I've read this, but I don't know what I read, I don't know what else I need to be asking from looking at it, that I completely understand. And if you're a part of our Facebook group called the Flipping 50, that is Flipping 50 Insiders group, it's a great place for you to ask questions about, what about this study I found? I don't understand it. We use those questions for podcasts in the future. So again, the show notes for today will be at flipping50.com/creatine. So super easy, and got lots of goodies here for you in the way of extras. So if you're wanting a continuous glucose monitor, you want to see, what was that again? Or the link to the BMI calculator. And again, if you just put that into your phone or your device you're using right now, it'll come up. It's from National Health Institute. And re-listen or come to the show notes to learn a little bit more about how you dive right into them. I hope that this has been helpful and that you understand the importance of it. A little tease that creatine is something that I'm looking at as important enough based on emerging research that I'm looking at a combination of a special supplement line for Flipping 50 based on this. That is how important. And remember, if you've been here for a minute, 30 years of my career, I swore never, ever, ever would I sell supplements until you realize there's a lot of crap out there. There's a lot of people wanting just to sell supplements because they know we're buying them. And the things you just find easy to buy and deliver to your doorstep from you know who are not necessarily clean. So we're on a mission to make sure that you have available to you good choices. All right. What are you waiting for? Let's start flipping 50 today.